Labour MP and one of our favourite correspondents anyhow, from the Labour Party caucus. Well, she represents herself, so I just want to say that quite clearly. The Labour Member of Parliament for Tairi, Ingrid Leary, and she joins us now. Ingrid, lovely to have you on. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael.
Listen, I'll just very quickly, before I get into other issues, in opposition, it's a weird position to be. I know I've been there. It's a weird position to be. You're sort of, to get any media coverage, you've got to disagree with people or suggest that there's some sort of great outrage. I mean, God, this goes back to the 1980s, probably even before that. But being in opposition, what you got to find out what you want to do, right? So your aim in opposition is what? To get into a position at the next election that you can be the government ready to go. Is that how you understand it?
Yeah, there's also holding government to account. So I think we're very focused on trying to make sure that this is a one-term government. But in the interim, where there are changes that can be made and U-turns that can be made that we can put pressure on so that there are good outcomes for people, that is absolutely part of the job as well, because it's not just about being in power. It's about, as you say, having good outcomes for people.
Okay. And so at the next election, you've got to have a series of policies that you think the rest of this country will want to endorse and embrace, yeah?
Yeah, and not only have those policies, have implementation plans, because, as you know, things often most times stand or fall on the implementation. So having a really clear implementation plan, I think, is part of the key as well. Okay.
Now, when Chris Hipkins, I think in the days after the last election was lost, said our job will be to listen to New Zealanders, essentially. We've obviously done something wrong, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are. We're going to listen to New Zealanders, and that's going to drive us. At what point does listening to New Zealanders conflict with what you think? In other words, do you listen to New Zealanders and what they're saying, or do you actually say, no, we've got a particular philosophical point of view which we think's more important, so we're not going to listen? Is there a conflict there?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I think what you're alluding to is the policy development process. For Labour, we do that very much as a party, from the party roots upwards. So we're going through that process at the moment, and when we have clarity on that is when we will come out. So, look, it's been almost a year into the term. I think we're probably where we should be about now, and soon we will need to be changing into that gear where we come up with what we have agreed on as a party, how we develop those policies, because the devil can be in the detail, and then, as I said previously, the implementation plans, which will be really important.
Okay, so one of the things, for example, last week and the week before that introduced or attracted some media attention is the concept of taxation, the equity of taxation, and even I think universal income was mentioned as part of that as well. I imagine David Parker's doing a fair bit of work on this as your opposition finance spokesperson. Oh, no, he's not, is he? Barbara Edmond is. So Barbara Edmond will be. Can I ask, Ingrid, I know your thoughts on this one, but do you think you're actually going to get to a position where you can offer a different tax policy at the next election?
I'm pretty confident that we will get there. There's a lot of discussion going on, which is a healthy thing. It's quite interesting that the media is so desperate to try and find a wedge issue that any discussion on this, they're trying to suggest that there's conflict in the party. We're having robust debates. There are different positions, but I think we're pretty united in the principles of being in step internationally, of supporting our economy, of having equity, and of being able to fund the things that we see are needed socially. So I'm confident we will get there, and I think the media commentary over the last week or so from our leader reflects that. If you look at the Politic article, I think there was a TV story. We will get there, and now we're going through the process of, what does that change look like and how will we implement it?
I know. So I've watched it, and I have some sympathy for the view. Don't get me wrong. The whole idea of being in opposition is you debate and discuss things. It's ridiculous to characterise that as division and dissent when people will have different views, but God, that's the way society's meant to be. No, I've sympathy with you there. No, the really interesting thing is when you talk about equity, that is almost a dog whistle, if you don't mind, for a capital gains tax. And I wondered how far your caucus has got along to that part of the journey so far.
Well, it's not up to the caucus. This is what I mean. We are a member-driven party. Unlike, I believe, some of the right-hand parties, it's not top-down. Our members are driving the discussion, and people in caucus have views, some differing views, but we will be guided by our members, and that's the very process that we're going through at the moment. We've got the annual conference coming up at the end of November, so I'm sure there'll be discussion there, and I think coming out of that conference is where you will see more formulated positions about how we see the taxation system.
Okay, I want to go back to that though. You talked about equity and you talked about standardisation with other international economies. To me, that means, Ingrid, a capital gains tax is imminent as Labour Party policy, surely.
No, I'm just saying that when I look at what some of our core values are as a party, fairness is probably the one that would sum things up, and then there are other elements to that like inclusion and so on. I think from a first principles perspective, any look at taxation, you really need to be looking first at what it is that you want to provide, or where is the public benefit, where should we be pooling money as a society for public good, and that is going to inform where the taxation system should sit, and then within that there are considerations of equity, whether something is good for the economy and grows and so on. I don't think that leads to any particular conclusion, but I do feel, and my views on taxation, there is a sense out there, certainly with the cuts that people are experiencing, we do need more money in the system, and we do need a fairer system, because it doesn't seem fair that some people are getting $1.9 billion tax breaks and others are struggling to turn the heating on. So, what conclusions we'll come to as a party will be seen in due course.
Well, I'm just looking at an interview that was published in the New Zealand Herald today. You've probably seen it as well. It is the outgoing Treasury head, Carolee McLeish. She's actually Australian. She's heading back to Australia to become their Auditor General. So that's a step up, I guess, from being the head of New Zealand's Treasury. But in her interview, she talks about New Zealand's got some major structural problems. And she talks about just what you've been talking about. New Zealand needs new ways of generating revenue, in other words, making money, and cutting expenditure. She's talking about a capital gains tax and a more efficient superannuation scheme. And she's matching those two things together. She says there's a structure. You can't do one thing at a time. You've got to deal with the structure. Do you agree with that?
I agree that we need to look holistically at the system, and I have read that article, and I've worked with Carolee actually when I sat on finance and expenditure, and we grilled her quite a lot when she was the head of Treasury. So the reality is we have an ageing population, we have low productivity. One of the things the current government is looking at is how can we increase productivity. That has been a perennial issue, good on them for trying, but we have to face the fact that there are more people going into seniorship and into retirement, so we will have issues about affordability. And we will have issues of where is the base to fund that so that people can have good and dignified lives. So, that's a systems approach. And I don't think it's helpful to pull one bit out and have a debate about it. I think we need to look first at what kind of society we want, and then you go, okay, what are the services that should be private? What are the services that people can expect support with, and how much support, and who should get that support, and then how do we pay for that? And that's when the tax discussion comes in.
Well, she also said that not all COVID policies that were implemented by the last government were temporary, timely and targeted. And she was quite critical of some of those. She said some worked really well. She was talking about the wage subsidy, but she said others were ongoing and shouldn't have been, and that's why the accounts are in a mess as well. Do you agree with that?
I think that it's easy with the benefit of hindsight to say, oh, I should have done more of this or less of that. They were building the plane while they were flying. COVID hadn't occurred before. the decisions had to be made very quickly. And when this analysis is done, and this is what I found with the Auditor General as well, actually, the reports would look in a kind of time-frozen utopia to say, oh, there should be more of this or that, say with the tourism fund. But the very real time constraints had very real potential impacts on people's lives. So the wage subsidy was out the door for some people, I think, within a few days of its announcement, and did literally stop businesses going belly up. So we have to find a way to learn from it, absolutely, and say in future, if we're in a situation like this, what could we do differently? But to criticise it and say it should have been done better, well, that's a benefit of hindsight thing.
Well, no, the point that she was making in that interview, Ingrid, was that they did say to the government, it's not timely targeted and temporary, and that they'd made that objection
but it's not up to Treasury to make the decisions.